I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of the podcast, which is a follow-up to an episode I recorded back in April with Graham Blunt of Plant Based Nursery. This episode is me chatting to Graham about new plant legislation that will come into force on December the 14th. The legislation he mentioned back in the April episode, in fact. This potentially affects anybody that resells plants, which includes cut flowers, Christmas trees and bulbs, and it may affect professional gardeners and garden designers too, who supply plants to their customers. It will also have an impact on those who buy plants. It's probably less of an interest to you if you're based outside the UK. So before we get to the interview, I'm issuing a disclaimer. I'm not an expert on this matter, and although he's pretty clued up, neither is Graham. If you think you may be affected, as Graham says, please do get in touch with DEFRA or go on their website for full details of the changes, which you may or may not be able to decipher. Here's a conversation that I had with Graham.
Well, the caveat I'm going to say is this is my own interpretation of the information I have to hand and may therefore not be the last word, and that this is just my interpretation. What I would like to say is I'm going to give the background to this. This plant health regulation has been driven by the food industry. They're the ones who belatedly realise that food crops can be affected by Xylella, by this, by that, being brought in ornamentals. So they've pushed it. This legislation is European legislation written for the EU. And before any bright sparks say, we're going to pull out and we don't need to do it, very, very wrong. We are going to do it, again, for two reasons. Firstly, because it is driven by the food industry and they want it whatever. And secondly, because we've actually written it. It's, I think, 90-odd% written by the UK for the European Union. So again, if we've written it, we're going to use it. The problem on the horizon is the B word, and this is why it's so vague, some of the information we're getting, because we don't know what our relationship's going to be with Europe. So we don't quite know how it's going to work with the borders. So they are hedging their bets because this was written for 28 nations to be applied centrally. Now we're applying it to 27 nations and we're having to rewrite our own. Again, it's basically double handling. So this is why there's a bit of a problem with it. But that's the background to it. That's why it is as it is. It's coming. There's no way it's not going to happen. There's no way it's coming. It's all to do with basically down to resale. Quick look at my notes because I did have it lined out.
Well, while you're looking at that, I'm also going to put a caveat on, which is that I met Nicola Spence at an event and I gave her my card and I asked her to get in touch about coming on the podcast. And I didn't hear from her. And I did also reach out to her on Twitter and she never replied to me. So I did invite her on for an interview about this subject. And I also, when I had my shop, spoke to my local rep, and asked him to come on the podcast, and he said he didn't feel qualified to do it. So, if anyone in DEFRA wants to get in touch, they'd be more than welcome because... Yeah,
they won't because it's not nailed down. There's still all blurry edges and they don't want to be seen to say something that may then later be contradicted because it isn't all settled. It's settling but not settled yet. I've had this from my rep. That's why he won't commit to anything because they just don't know. And the B word thing is going to make it a bit like this for the next few years or so because it's going to take years to sort out a trade deal with the EU one way or another. So that's why you won't get an official discussion because they're hiding behind the legislation.
Which doesn't really help anyone, does it?
It doesn't. But there is a basic rule to this. It's all about traceability. So if I just stick to plant passporting, and I'll give you my own personal situation. Those of you know I grow every single thing from scratch, and I supply only to the end user. I do supply botanic gardens and other bits and pieces. I've had conversations with my DEFRA rep, and he says... Because I supply direct to the end user, I'm low risk and safe. And because I'm checked and disease-free, I don't need to be plant passported. The grey area is firstly because I supply botanic gardens around the country and they all have a shop and they can all resell my plants if they so should wish. They could propagate it and sell it. They don't. After all, we've all been to a National Trust garden, seen a lovely plant in the garden. You know damn well that ain't going to be for sale in their shop because they never sell what they grow in their gardens. It's how it is. So that's a grey area, and he's given me the benefit of the doubt there. The other grey area is I do supply some landscapers, but I don't go out of my way to do so. I'm not a wholesale nursery. I don't target them. I don't give them discount. if anything, they're coming in off the shelf. So again, they're taking that as a grey area. That may change legislation-wise, I don't know. So again, I'm sort of slipping under the radar here. I would say the most important thing is, if nothing else, contact your local DEFRA person. Be as honest as possible. Try and be their friend, basically. Because they're not there to destroy you or kill you or anything like that. They are there to make the whole system work. So you want to talk to them and just ask for their help, see what they suggest. Don't try and be awkward. Do not bury your head in the sand. Like I said, this is coming, whether you like it or not. It's been coming for the last year and a half. It's going to happen. You've got 12 days before it starts getting enforced. I don't think it'll be enforced 100% from day one because they're still feeling their way around it, but it's going to start coming in, so it's going to happen.
If someone bought some plants from you and then either propagated them or just literally took them as they were and then stuck them on their shelf and resold them,
then I would need to be plant passported.
Why is the onus not on the person doing the reselling?
In that case, it would be, because I'd be selling to them with the knowledge that they weren't going to resell it. If they resell it, then they're breaking the law. They're the ones who would then be liable, not me. Again, it goes back to what I said about the landscapers. I don't know necessarily someone coming in as a landscaper. They're just buying off the shelf. So I'm acting in good faith, and that's the key thing here. It's good faith. If you are deliberately selling to someone to resell, then you're going to need to be plant passported.
And why would that be a problem?
It's not. It depends how high risk you are. The more you buy in and sell on, and the more it's sold on, the more times you get visited. The way it works, you've got to pay for a plant passport, which I think is about £80 It's on the DEFRA website, the exact cost, about £80 which is not an awful lot of money. It's fine. Yes, you've got to implement it. You've got to get the labelling machines. You've got to get the right information, blah, blah, blah. It's all about traceability, blah, blah, blah. The problem comes is when DEFRA comes to visit you to check how you're doing things, because that's what costs. It's about, again, please check the websites, it's about £68 per 15 minutes for the first hour, then it's about £38 or thereabouts for every 15 minutes after, plus their travel time. If you're low risk, they might check you once, but you're still looking at £700, £800, £900, £1,000. If you're high risk because you're importing a lot of stuff in, or you're selling a whole lot of stuff left, right and centre, especially if you're importing, you could be visited once a month, maybe even more. And that gets really, really pricey. I do know of a few nurseries that are being visited once a month, and it's costing them a hell of a lot of money.
So if they imported plants from, say, the continent, so if you were a nursery, it was importing plants, you would buy them in from the continent and they would have a plant passport when they came in?
They would have to have a plant passport. You would also need to be checked because you're passing that plant passport on. As I say, it's not the plant passport that costs, it's the checks that check the plant passporting. And this is the interesting thing, because I've heard people say, oh, that'll be fine, because what the Dutch will do is they'll load a lorry up with one variety of plant, have one plant passport, and it'll cost another 10p, if that, for the whole shipment, and that's how they're going to get around it. It won't work. That won't work for two reasons. Firstly, if you is selling that one variety, and cacti here is a classic example. You can't, if you fill out a lorry with one variety of cacti, you're never going to sell it, because it just doesn't have enough sales behind it to make that work. It just won't work. And the second reason is DEFRA won't necessarily be targeting the lorry; they'll be targeting you, buying it from the lorry. They'll then check you, and that's where the cost will come. So you'll be paying for the plant passport. You might be paying. There's also things like CITES. I mean, the cacti example is a brilliant one, because you've got every cacti comes under CITES, and I believe there's a CITES levy per species on cacti, as well as plant passporting, as well as this and Nagoya and blah 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 and everything else. But it's the way it's being applied. It's that chain. It's traceability. Again, I'll give you the example of a farm. You go into a farm to buy some veg. They're unlabeled because you've seen the fields they come from. They come from the farmer. You can ask them about him or her about it. It's all there. When you go to a supermarket, you need the traceability. You need to know that these beans have come from Kenya or Israel, or they've been manufactured in Cadbury's or done here or done there. And so everything has to be labelled and quantified. As an aside, I personally think all this regulation is, and I'm going to be hated for this probably, is a good thing, a very good thing, because I believe our nursery is probably our industry is one of the last unregulated industries there is. And it's a bit of a wild west. You get things being sold. Is this hardy? Oh, yeah. Is this growing shade? Oh, yes. How about full sun? Oh, it does that as well. Is it perennial? Oh, yeah, it's not annual, it's perennial. And there's no traceability, no regulation. You can go into a garden centre and there'll be unlabelled plants that are just sold. I mean, you wouldn't buy a piece of furniture without an FSC on it. You wouldn't buy a car without an MOT or without, the relevant documentation. Just because the car's dangerous, so are plants. You've got toxic plants, poisonous plants. You've got plants that kill you stone dead and yet totally unregulated. This, I think, will create a fantastic niche for small independent nurseries to start up, build up, and start creating their own products and basically taking on the bigger companies, because it destroys the diseconomies of scale, basically.
And does the plant passport apply to every single species? There's nothing that's exempt?
I don't think there's anything that's exempt. Simply, it's this resale thing. If you're going direct from the grower to the end, it doesn't need it. But as soon as it starts going through a chain, it's like anything. Once you're adding to that chain, you need the accountability, you need the traceability. And this is where the root comes in. It's like, I've heard some red herrings about the distance selling, how if you sell at a distance, again, that doesn't matter. That's not what they're targeting. They want to make certain that what you're selling is safe. I mean, the distance selling is fairly irrelevant, because you say, okay, if I travel 100 miles to do a show, that's distance selling. But I could sit in my nursery, not go 10 feet and have a chap come down from Scotland and buy some plants and take them back to Scotland. So it's not that, it's the resale part of it.
And if I were to buy some plants from Holland and then sell them on, when you say that they need a plant passport, what does that actually consist of?
I'm not 100% sure, because as I don't need it, I haven't really looked into it. I have read about it. There are certain things you've got to have. You've got to have, I think there's batch numbers. You've got to put down the name of it, when it was passported. There's a whole, it's on the DEFRA website. There's a whole list of information you have to have on the actual passport. How you format the passport is then up to you, as long as it contains that relevant information. And it is about the traceability of it. And it carries that passport all the way through the chain. Again, it's so that someone can look at it and see how it's been made and where it's come from and what it is. It's that accountability, which is key. That
might take the form of a label in the plant.
It is a label. Yeah, it is a label. You'll need the proper printy thingamajiggies to do it, and there'll be various programs which I'm sure are going to be flogged. And in fact, I've had a few phone calls of late from companies saying, we can offer you a point-of-sale kit that does it all for you.
You surprise me.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's out there. It doesn't have to be totally expensive, but it is regulation where we've never had regulation before. The other problem with our industry, and hopefully this will also change it, is because we have such low barriers to entry, is that our industry is seen as being worthless. I mean, any Tom, Dick and Harry can set up a nursery. I mean, even myself, I have no horticultural qualifications whatsoever, yet I run a nursery. Didn't say successful nursery. And that's probably baiting people to say, yeah, you can tell you're not qualified. Same with gardeners. Any fool can be a gardener. And yet, if you look at, say, another analogy here, a plumber or an electrician, they've got to have qualifications, they've got to have passes, they've got to have apprenticeships, etc., etc. And we know how much they charge. Now, I would say that a good nurseryman or person or woman or whatever, or a gardener, has as much skill, if not more of a skill set than a plumber or an electrician. And apologies to any electricians and plumbers out there. But the knowledge we have to have about what we do, how you cut a hedge, how you trim a bush, how you dig this, do that, grow this, grow that, is huge. And yet, so often you're hearing minimum wage. Oh, you're just a grower. Is that what you are? Oh dear, you're riffraff. So hopefully this regulation will start putting barriers to entry, which will then make the people who are in it more valued. And it'll be better for all of us then. This is he preaching, Lee.
Okay, I'm trying to think of another scenario. If I'm a garden designer.
Yes.
Or a gardener, and I go to a nursery, either a trade nursery or a retail nursery, and I buy some plants, and then I plant them in my client's garden and charge them for the plants that I've bought on their behalf. I need a plant passport, do you think?
The plants have to have a plant passport with them.
Right.
You don't need to do the passport yourself because you're buying. But the person who you're buying from, if they know that's what you're doing, have to provide you with the plant passport, because it's that resale point. You yourself don't, because, like I said, if you're a shopkeeper and you're buying stuff from, I don't know, food from Cadbury's, food from Nestle or whatever, it comes already pre-labelled to the regulations. It's got the weight of it, it's got how much sugar's in it, how much salt's in it, how much this, that, what the packaging is made of, whether it's recyclable. It's all there ready for you because you're reselling it. So that's already done for you up front. But Cadbury's can't sell that to you, or whatever companies, I don't know why I keep saying Cadbury's, but whatever company is selling to you, if they know it's going for resale, then it has to be labelled correctly to the relevant regulations.
Okay. So if I was one of those garden designers who buys plants, keeps them in a yard, sells them on to the client for a markup, I'm assuming then
they need to be plant passported.
Yeah.
Yes, it's that passing through another set of hands. It's that again the key word here I think is resale. If the plants are going for resale, if I started, even though I grow every single thing myself, if I became a wholesaler, everything would need to be plant passported because I'm wholesaling, because it's going on for resale elsewhere. So the person who's reselling it needs the information to legally be able to resell it. So you as a garden designer would need to have a plant passport on this olive or this podalia or whatever it is, so you can then legitimately sell it. It has to be passported because you have not created that plant, you have not grown it.
So even you grow all your stock from your own parent plants or seed or whatever.
Yes.
Even you need to be inspected.
Even me, yes.
Even you. So if someone's got a plant stand in their front driveway and they're growing stuff from seed,
this is where you get grey areas, because this happens in every industry. You can set up, it's like food. If you're selling food, you can have a lemonade stand in front of your house. If something goes wrong, you're probably going to get sued to death. But other than that, it just slips under the radar. I mean, there still be situations where old biddies go and sell a few plants they've grown on the plant heritage stand, sat in the middle of the church fete. It happens. Same as if you bake some brownies for a church fete, you've done it yourself. You've got no food ingredients. It's the black economy, and it slips under the net because it's so small. It's fairly irrelevant. So yes, that would be the case. But on any scale, no, you'll need to be regulated.
Yeah. And if you were buying a plant from a nursery as a buyer, what are you looking out for? Just this label with the information on it?
Yes. As far as I know, there is also stuff about CITES documentation, and there's the Nagoya Protocol drifting around as well. So you've got to be careful with everything. But at the moment, it just seems to be mainly the plant passport. I mean, this is going to take time to implement, because I know a lot of the DEFRA staff are still working on Brexit. So it's not going to happen overnight, but the mechanics are going to start going into place. And as it works, they'll iron out the problems. The other thing to also bear in mind with DEFRA now is that they now have far greater powers than they ever used to have before. I'll tell you a little scary story, if I may. Okay, let's go for it. This is told to me by a good gentleman who is the Chief Procurement Officer for the new garden at Bridgewater. And what it was, DEFRA discovered a shrub which had, I think it's Chalola, which is the ash dieback disease, but it wasn't on an ash, it was on something else. They discovered it on a sample plant. They were able to identify who the customers were, so I'm assuming it must have been mail order. They went round to everybody's door, went into the garden, removed the plant and destroyed it. No warrants, they just have that power. Which, if you think it's a disease, then they're going to have that power. It's like customs. Customs don't need a warrant to break into your house. Police do, customs don't. And I suspect they've now got shared powers in those kind of instances. So if they don't like the look of something in a nursery, they will destroy it. Yeah. End of.
There'll be people putting razor wire around their gardens as we speak.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's other restrictions. I found out recently, although I need to double check this, but it came from a good source. You can't buy solanum seed anymore. Yeah, I know. I grow loads of solanums, like, whoops, because it's tomatoes and potatoes, which are really valuable food crops. Right. And I believe solanum seed can carry disease. So it's now, at the moment, as far as I know, it was given to me by a very, very good source, so I have no reason to doubt it. But you can't import solanum seed. It's still for sale, and I'm sure if you did happen to buy it, if it got through customs, you'd be fine. But if they find it, they'll destroy it.
Crikey.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate, we did cover this when I spoke to you back in April. If I've got a variegated cheese plant, which I have,
yes,
and I take a cutting,
yes,
and I decide to start flogging them on eBay, which I haven't because mine's not even big enough to do anything with anyway. But if I was propagating house plants, for example, and just selling the cuttings or whatever on eBay or anywhere like that.
Again, I think that would be okay because you're the grower. Because you're taking your plant, you're producing it, and then you're selling it direct to the end user.
Right.
So, yes, I don't think they'll come under regulation. And again, there's always a little bit of leeway with all these things. Again, it's the black market syndrome where it's like PBRs. You can grow 20, 30 or whatever, it's 50 plants from a PBR and sell it without actually being prosecuted because you're allowed to do that. It's for personal use. Mm-hmm. That's the phrase. It's for personal use. Where a potential problem comes, and this could even affect me, is I quite often will buy a plant from another nursery because I like the look of it, or it's a hybrid I haven't seen before, or it's a species I haven't got. If I then propagate it and sell it, then it would need to be plant passported, I think, under these present rules. How that will be enforced, I don't know.
I don't know how it would be enforced because I get the impression that a lot of the time, even experts don't really know whether something is this species or that species.
Too right.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, too right. I think what they'll be doing is they'll be checking your facilities yourself. I do know from a source that they are targeting people who are at most risk. So, I mean, the classic example here is, and no offence to them, it's your market traders who don't even have a lockup. They just have a van and a garage. Stuff comes in, stuff goes out, stuff comes in, stuff goes out. They don't know what they're selling, but God blimey, missus, it's lovely, buy 2 for a tenner type thing. They're on the red hot list because for obvious reasons, they could spread a disease within a matter of minutes from it arriving. Plant passport or no.
So I still don't understand. If it comes in from the continent with a plant passport, presumably that means it's okay. Or do some things take a while to incubate and then they
It means it should be okay, but what they're doing is then checking the reseller of that their principles are good. So although the plant passport has a plant passport, because you're selling all this stuff, you're going to be checked. Does that make sense?
Not entirely, because
okay. How do I describe this?
What are the odds of you having a disease on your nursery?
It's the risk level, and what they're doing is assessing each person by person to assess their risk level. Someone like that who, because they're buying plants from different sources, they may not know if the plant has a disease, so they're deliberately going to check. How do I put this? They want to stop people passing plants on. They would rather people grew them and sold them to the end user with a minimum chain, because that minimises the risk. So they will target people who are purely reselling because they can, and because they want to check the facilities, check how they're being stored, because disease can get into a storage. If you've got a number of plants, it can be spread like that. Does that seem to make sense?
Yes, if we're talking about notifiable diseases and pests, which I presume we are.
Yes.
However, it does smack a little bit to me of them trying to stamp out people profiting from reselling plants that have come in cheap.
Yes, it is. There is an element of that. But again, it's to do with plant disease. They would rather the plants were grown in this country under our conditions correctly than just shipped in and shipped out.
You could argue if that was their aim, then they should probably have been putting the infrastructure in place a long time ago, rather than pulling the rug out and letting everyone deal with it.
Oh, this should have been done 10, 20, 30 years ago, to be honest. And it should be done in Europe 10, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, the damage Xylella is doing is horrific. I think only about a month ago they destroyed 1,200 almond orchards in Spain because of the Xylella, and it's spreading here, there and everywhere. We don't know how this is going to pan out is the main thing. I do know what the intentions behind it are, and it is to minimise plant disease and the transfer of plant disease. The shorter the chain, the easier it is to spot where something goes wrong. If you've got plants going from A to B, because normally even with the Dutch stuff coming over, it's not one Dutch nursery you're buying from, it's a collective, so they collect their stuff together. That gets put into an order. That order then goes through a factor. That factor then goes to the market trader. The market trader then sells it onto the public. And you've got this whole chain and sequence of events where something could go wrong. And although it's plant passport down the chain, they're going to want to check that chain all the way through. They can't check the Dutch side of it because that's down to the Dutch enforcement, but they can check the UK side of it and see what's happening to the goods.
So if you are, say, B&Q...
Yes.
You are buying direct from the grower in bulk. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really affect you because you've got a lot more money. You're bringing stuff over in a lot larger quantities. So therefore, the costs of, if your plant passporting costs presumably go down because you can bring in a lorry load of one species. So say you bring in one shrub, a type of shrub, comes straight from from the Dutch. You ship it in. You then send it out to your stores. By the following Friday, they've all gone out to customers. They're all in the ground. They're non-traceable. How does that help with plant health?
Because I don't think it quite works like that. I think what happens is B&Q don't buy direct from the growers. They buy through factors. I might be totally wrong here, but I suspect this is how it works. So a factor will collate different bits and pieces of Dutch. Because even though B&Q have, say, using an example, have loads of stores, they still have to have a variety of plants. They can't just sell the one shrub or the one tree or the one rose or whatever it is. And their factor is also going to get checked. So it's not just the Dutch carrying the plant passport, the factor who's then storing it for 2-3 days, because it doesn't come straight. The lorry of, say, the one species of rose doesn't come over and then they send it out to all the different little branches, because some branches won't need some branches have already got some left over. So it'll have to go to a storage area, which will be the factor. That will then be checked. If there's loads of stuff there, that's going to take a long time to check, and that's where the cost comes in, I think. I mean, this is conjectural. This is me imagining how it will work, but I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to check every point along the chain, and again, taking the view that they want to slow down the movement of exports. The more high risk it is, the slower they're going to check it, and the more they're going to charge, says he very cynically, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So everything's come in en masse. It's all gone to a kind of aggregator, then it's gone out to different stores, whoever they are, then it's gone out to customers' gardens, then we find there's a problem. What good does it do anyway to know?
Because if there's a problem on it, there's a plant passport, which means it can be traced right back to whoever grew it in the first place, and almost certainly that's where the disease would have come from. So it will have on that plant passport where it originated from. So I think that's how it will work. It's because it's traceable right to the origin.
And will that be an instance of closing the door after the horse has bolted?
Probably, but at least it's quicker than not having that system in place, if you see what I mean. If you can catch a disease... One of the things they try to do is isolate the disease. So if they catch it at the port, they can isolate it and destroy it there. Once it's into the public domain and starts to spread, you can't isolate it and it's too late. It's escaped. So I think it can be isolated. If they're checking the factor, there's a better chance. If they're checking at the root, where it comes from, if they're checking on the process as it travels, crosses the borders, if they're checking it as it arrives at the factor or the wholesaler or whatever it is, and then checking it when it comes to the store, you've got that. There's more possibility. It's not perfect.
No, and it does. I still can't really understand why, if it's checked when it comes in, then checked again when it's kind of in a holding facility, I then can't see why it makes any difference if it goes to B&Q or to a market trader, really.
Well, they're both targeted to the same degree, I think.
Do you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing here. What I'm trying to guess with is the information, what the intention is, which is to slow down the movement of plants, to mitigate the possible spread of diseases. It's not going to be 100%, but it's going to slow it down and might give us a fighting chance. And extrapolating it out with the tools they have available, this is what I believe they're going to try and do and try and enforce. I'm guessing, this is just my information, this is just my guesswork, but I think that's the intention. It's going to take a while for the dust to settle. There's lots of processes and difficulties that may turn up. I think it's a necessary thing. It may not be perfect, but it's a start. And I do think it will be good for the industry in the long term, simply because it will force us to... What we used to do, we used to grow loads of plants in this country. And then it went mass production, and we didn't have the mass production advantages certain other countries may or may not have had, allegedly, if you see what I mean.
I do, indeed. So how will this affect the end consumer?
It will make the plants more expensive. But I'm hoping what it will get rid of is this stuff where we knock out, 3 for a £5, fill your bag for a £5, do this, flog it cheap, otherwise I'm just going to chuck it in the skip. It will reduce, hopefully, some of that waste. I'm sure it probably won't, but I'm hoping that's what it will achieve. I can't remember what the question was now.
Well, obviously, somebody's going to have to pay for this, and it
Yes,
sounds
sorry,
as if the nurseries are. I suppose my question is, how much is the end user going to pay as well?
It will be. Again, I'll give you an analogy here, and I've heard this from a few other nurseries as well. You'll see someone drinking a cup of coffee that's costing £2-3 when you're at a show, and they'll be looking at house sleep, which costs £3. They're going, you couldn't do two for £2 each, could you? And it's like, if you actually think about it, the cost of production, the time spent on growing a house leek is actually more expensive than what you're drinking in your hand. And it's that appreciation of value. I think our plants are too cheap. They are living things. They need looking after. If you think even the house leeks takes me 6 months to grow, even if I only spend a minute a day looking after it, weeding it, watering it, feeding it, potting it up, sorting it out, keeping the squirrels off it, it soon adds up. Even on minimum wage, that time adds up, and it comes to probably not far off £3, and yet it's looked upon as being worthless. Again, it's this barriers of entry and the perception. In this country in particular, we're so, I'm going to be insulting to the UK nation, we're so obsessed with getting a good price. I mean, a good example is the French. They'll buy a dress, one dress, obviously the females, not the males, will buy a dress and they'll outfit it and accessorise it for the whole year, but it'll be an expensive dress and it will last and look bloody good. In this country, oh no, we want 20 cheap T-shirts, £1 each, wear them once, they fall apart anyway, chuck them in the bin, buy another one, buy a cheap dress that looks. And it's that attitude. Again, the plant should be there to grow. One of the things I hate the most is when I hear nurserymen saying, oh, if they buy that, it'll die, then they'll come back and buy another one. And it is the worst way of marketing I've ever come across.
Oh, that's a terrible thing to
say. It is terrible, but it's true. I hear it so often.
Jeez.
I've even heard that from official staff that might work for certain charities, if you see what I mean. Saying, oh, don't worry, Graham, it's a Sunday, you can sell them this rubbish and they'll come back and buy some more next year. And I always brought up, I studied marketing and economics for about 4 years, and if I'd even breathed that to a lecture, I'd have been slung out the course, because it's the word, it's dishonest and potentially illegal anyway, because you're deliberately selling a product to fail. And secondly, it's a really bad way of marketing, because you look at the bedding market. They created the fool's market for the January, February sales to die, so they'd come by and buy the next lot in March and April. And now look at the bedding market. They wrecked it because people at the end gave up. Oh, well, I can't grow bedding. I'm not going to grow it anymore. End of. It's a daft way. So I'm hoping this kind of thing will start weeding that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, we definitely don't pay a true price for things, that's for sure. And we don't understand the value of things a lot of the time.
Especially as the garden industry now isn't perceived yet, but it's vital to the food industry for food security, because we're losing the wildlands. We need the gardens for repository, for biodiversity, for basically food security, to keep the food crops going, because monocultures don't work. We know that. And at the moment, gardens are seen, why have a garden where you can build a house on it type thing. And that attitude's got to change. And again, this, I hope, is part of it. It's the bigger picture. Again, it's not the specific plant passport. It's the bigger picture, what we're trying to create.
And will it affect the availability of some plants, do you think?
Almost certainly initially. I mean, I don't know how it's going to affect. It all depends on how it's enforced. It all depends on how nurseries and growers react, and how wholesalers react, and how the industry reacts. But yes, there will be teething troubles at first. But I do foresee there's nothing we can't grow in this country, and there's nothing we can't grow in this country really well. And I can see where people at the moment look into this industry and go, I'm not joining horticulture because I can't make ends meet. If we can make a living, not necessarily have gold-plated vans and loads of bling, but I make half decent living, we might start getting people coming in from outside the industry thinking, hey, you know what? I don't know about plants, but I fancy working that side. Let's start a nursery. Let's make a living out of it. And we'll grow, I don't know, where's the gap in the market? Ooh, no one's doing alströmerias, because they all came from, I don't know, Japan, Holland, whatever. So I'll grow alströmerias and I'll supply the UK market with alströmerias direct. And that kind of thing.
I must just point out, Primrose Hall Nurseries are doing alströmerias, and I interviewed them in a previous episode, so I'm just putting it out there. So that's it. That's as much as I can find out for now. Thank you very much to Graham for taking part. You'll find the links to his nursery in the show notes. If you've got any more information and you want to get in touch with me, then please do email me or find me on social media. It'd be great to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you on Tuesday for the full episode. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.